our Nganga Grassroots Young Feminist Network that shared about the experience in even accessing, sometimes pets are not the priority in every household shopping list. Sometimes it's food rather than pets, menstrual pets. So how are we having the conversation? How are we dealing about this conversation? Hence why for us as the regional coalition, it's important to create this kind of space, because this is where we also can talk about partnership in how whoever is doing this work in pushing for servicing and making sure that all these facilities are filled with all these utensils that are required by young women and women in their communities, in the dispensary, in village dispensary or with a village nurse. How are we working together to make sure that they can access some of these services? Ecology, climate justice, disaster risk reduction, biodiversity protection. As DIVA, we're very clear, and we try to push this also in the coalition, is we can never talk about sexual reproductive health and rights without talking about our environment and how we are taking care of it, and how it's also part of our everyday life, that we are in a place that for someone that is from the outer island trying to access a service where they go for their medical checkup or their monthly check as a pregnant woman, how are we able to navigate the things that they would require to make sure that they get to the service? To make sure that when they are relocating because of loss and damage, how do we make sure that they're still able to access the service? How we as a service providers or someone that is providing this particular kind of service will make sure that take into consideration that there is a reality of impact and linkage of loss and damage into the work that we are doing. Therefore, we need to talk about loss and damage. Therefore, we need to push our SRHR agenda into the climate global spaces or climate decision-making spaces. Next, Tamani. And then the next two slides is really to talk about, what has really emerged, like what is really after some of the progress, some of the shift that we have done together in this work. But some of the key issues that is arising right now is these issues around patriarchy. To be able to tackle these issues about bodily autonomy and women not having the rights to make even their own decision about their body, we need to uproot the cause of it. And most of these issues are because of this patriarchal system that has been embedded so much right from the inside of our household into our community, society, and also within how the structure of the provided by states is also set up. Patriarchy the reason we have been talking about this in the last 4 webinars, because if we don't spend some time to really uproot the causes of Hawaii, how we are still we're still hearing a lot of women being killed, a lot of people being oppressed by their rights to access some services. We need to look deep into the whole dimension of patriarchal system, that it's not just about hating men. It's not about just hating the fact that, men and because they're masculine. It's about a system that even can also harm men. And if we don't talk about it in such a way, then patriarchy system, it will be very challenging for feminists and groups like IPPF and all these other organizations that is part of the coalition to really push for the gender in uprooting patriarchy system. Ad hoc understanding and attention to gender justice by Pacific governments, CROPs, and CSOs. We need to make sure that, Pacific governments and CSOs, that SRHR is also part of their agenda, main agenda, and not just like coming in ad hocing into spaces or coming into spaces when they are invited and only on that part of the ceremony that they understand, that they spend some time in understanding SRHR and gender justice. And one of the things that we're really trying to push now is we'll never talk about SRHR without talking about gender justice and SOGISEC, right? Those concepts needs to go together in hand, because without gender justice, how do we talk about sexual reproductive health and rights that is particularly is about everyone, that we recognize the intersect of all identities within one body, and how do we come up with better way to better the services if certain people are still kept out because they are not, the system in place is not recognizing them as part of the main priority of community. SRHR indicators in the dashboard of the 2050 strategy. So in the 2050 strategy for the Blue Pacific continent, one of the things that DIVA has been really trying to push for now as a coalition is really to allow the opportunity for other specific engagement that is bringing our leaders together to push the agenda on SRHR, not just about coming into the space because it's just about climate justice, or it's about peace and security, or it's about a regional decision-making bodies that is about green or blue funding. We need to make sure that we are pushing the envelopes in the linkage between all these strategies, that we cannot talk about that without talking about how to better the services to meet the people's bodies, to make sure that it's irrespective of women's and girls and all people's gender identity and sexual rights and reproductive rights. So therefore, the 2050 strategies is one of the platforms that we're going to try and really push. Then gender responsive funding to Pacific Resilience Facility. We need a specific Pacific resilience facility because we understand what is required by our people and our community, and why we cannot be allowing other funders, other countries to come with their own planning. One of the things that we were really pushing for when we were at UNEA last week was we can't even keep being linked together as just the Asia Pacific. There's no such term as Asia Pacific. There is Asia and the Pacific, and therefore Pacific have our own recommendation. Pacific have our own ways of dealing with our issues. So any development, any response of development that comes out or goes out, it has to be Pacific framed, and it has to be from the Pacific it has to be put together by experts that are from the Pacific, that understand the context and conditions of our countries. So part of that work, we still continue as a coalition, and we'll still push forward. And with these kind of partnerships that we are building within the coalition, really emphasize and really push this work even better for us. ICPD has been, we will not lie about this, that even for us as an organization, we haven't been engaging so much in the ICPD platform because we've always have this thing about our other feminist sister organization will cover that platform while we do other work. But because of the rising of fascism and how we are just been really have a closed down on the issues of sexual reproductive health and rights, one of the things that we are revisiting now is how do we make our presence back into the ICPD, because it is required right now at this urgent time when we are undergoing all these things about fascism, the rising of fascism, and also the limitation of access into spaces for CSO or NGOs organization. Next slide, please, Tamani. Yeah, and maybe just on this last slide, just to say, the effects of fascism is real. Let's not go into spaces where it's set up by specific kind of funders to keep rewriting our narrative. We need to rewrite our own narrative and start claiming these spaces. Let's be very clear in how we are engaging into some of these spaces, because some of these spaces, I would say that they are just, I don't like saying this, but some of these spaces that are convened, that are being organized by some of these funders that are actually part of this fascism circle is really just getting us into the space, just tick a box that they're still having work with us. But really nothing has really shifted and changes in the way that they work in their own state or even in their own work. So it's very important that we relook at this and we make sure that we are speaking back to this. Influence of organized religion. We're in the Pacific. We all know that religion plays a big role in our home, in our community. But when we're having to see a lot of rapists that is still happening within our homes by our fathers, our uncles, our brothers, and when we still have unsafe abortion, when we still have news that is highlighting unsafe abortion, then we cannot keep pretending that we are a religious country, and being religious, we cannot talk about this thing. We need to start talking about it because it's happening, and it's happening right under our nose. And this is something that we really cannot pretend anymore, because we have to think about the kind of future that we are setting up for our future children and for our children's children that are coming up. Do we really want to keep allowing this kind of trend to keep flowing into them, or we're able to strategically and in a very in a way that is very convening also to states or government states? How do we work better together? Because we might have, you might think that there's not a way to speak about this in religious spaces, but some of us are well trained. Some people has been doing this marvelous work on CSE. How do we bring that into these spaces, and to make sure that all these issues, that it's not just about morality, but it's about saving someone's life, or changing or shifting some of the ways and system that is being embedded and has been how we've been taught that that's the only way to negotiate or to approach such issues. I think situation on SRHR funding is important in the region and globally. Thanks to MFED and PFF, we're able to have this convening, and we'll have another sets of convening in the upcoming 5 years through the FWRM, because we're able to secure some funds. But this shouldn't be the only fund that we are able to move some community work with. We should request for more funding to enable this kind of flexibility of doing this kind of convening, not just in a workshop platform, but also those community Talanoa session that we're able to convene in part, having the ability in having these funds. Yeah? And then maybe just the last one I would say is that, effects of heteronormative lack of understanding is very real for some of us that are in a homosexual relationship, or are lesbian and bisexual or gay. So therefore, if you are one that consider yourself as an expert on sexual reproductive health and rights, then you need to be comfortable to talk about SOGISEC. You need to be comfortable to talk about, to name it as all lesbian, bisexual, trans woman rights is important, and you should be able to have no shame in talking about abortion, in talking about contraceptive, and naming all these issues like vagina, penis, and all, because it's only if we who are considering ourselves as experts able to change some of the way in how we are communicating, how we are linking this work on SRHR with all other issues, which is on violence against women, on gender inequality services, on SOGISEC. Until we change some of that narrative in how we're speaking about it, then I'm sure that a lot of changes can happen also on the community level, and also be able to have the opportunity to influence our leaders if we all come together with one voice. So with having to say that, thank you, Tamani, for the time, and Mamta for the opportunity. Now I give it back to Tamani. Thank you.